Coming up on Let It Rip Weekend, Betsy Devos wants to arm teachers in schools and use federal funding to pay for it. Will arming teachers help deter violence in schools or only make it more dangerous? Also, Kroger stores are planning to ban plastic bags and a rather awkward tribute by Madonna to the Queen of Soul.
I left Detroit when I was 18. $35 in my pocket. My dream was to make it as a professional dancer. After years of struggling and being broke, I decided to go to auditions for musical theater.
Plus, what was Serena wearing at the French Open? Let It Rip Weekend starts right now.
All right, welcome to Let It Rip Weekend. Our guest today, first of all, Education Secretary Betsy Devos is looking at a legal loophole to get some guns in schools.
That's right. Devos is considering letting states use federal funds to arm teachers in schools. Now, is arming teachers the solution to add protection in schools? Well, we'll see what the panelists think. It's time to let it rip.
All right, let's joining me now on the panel today. First of all is Rick Ector. He is the guru of guns, gun safety instructor. Always good to have you on the show as well. Next to him, Dr. Sabrina Jackson, doctor, also host of a talk show as well. What's the name of your talk show?
The Essentially Sabrina Show.
Yikes. Okay, and next to her, State Representative Abdullah Hammoud. He's a state representative in the Dearborn Heights area. Dearborn, excuse me. Dearborn area, that's right. And of course, Mark Lee, host of Small Talk, a prominent talk show host as well. All right, panelists, thank you so much. Let's start with the first question here. We heard about this. Rick Ector, I'm going to give this to you. Yes, seems to me if you're using federal dollars for schools, for guns, the choice would be either guns or perhaps books for kids. Do you look at it that way?
No, I don't look at it as an either-or proposition. I think the most important thing that we discharge or we expect for our school administrators to do is to ensure that there's a safe environment for the children. If we are lax in our duty to exercise due care and caution to keep them safe, everything else that we talk about, particularly with education and training people, it's all for naught and it's moot.
Dr. Sabrina, I mean, that seems like a pretty good argument. The kids have to be safe before they can learn, right?
Yes, but I think that as a teacher, I went to school to teach. I went to school to educate. I went to school for academics. I didn't go to school to be a gun-toting protector. That is not my role. And then you're not going to pay me anymore. So my thing is, if you're going to use federal dollars for this and teachers are paid so deplorably, we can't give them more money to just teach first?
Oh. You know, on many other episodes of the news in which we talk about this issue, money was always the sticking point, like who's going to pay for it. Now that we've identified a source of funding to address that pay issue, now we're finding that people who are on the other side of the issue are now throwing up other roadblocks. I believe we all understand and agree that protecting our children is most important, and if we can't keep them safe, what curriculum they use, what topics they cover, it doesn't make
If I can push back, with due respect, you said it's not an either or, but it is an either or. Teachers today go into their own pockets to make sure they pay for the resources they need into the classrooms. We have Detroit public schools where the infrastructure is crumbling. We have schools all across our state where the infrastructure is crumbling. I think if we have resources, first and foremost, let's get the adequate number of counselors at our schools. Let's get the adequate number of social workers at our schools. Let's put the right mental health protocols in place. Let's make sure our teachers have a living wage. Let's make sure that we have all the resources that children need to learn equitably across our state. After all that is done, then you maybe permit the conversation of should we
securing the safety of our students should be the last.
And I think it's really important to invest. I totally agree. Invest those resources back into the classroom and the bottom line. Like, I'm also an educator. I'm an adjunct professor at Eastern Michigan University, and my role is to come in and to educate. and to teach. And I got to be honest with you. I would be very concerned if there are guns in the classrooms. I'm not sure that, quite frankly, quite candidly, I would ever want to go back into the classroom to teach, knowing that guns might be in the classroom. I would not. I would feel less safe.
It's certainly not a unanimous decision among teachers whether or not they want guns in the schools. And then you have situations like Parkland where you have people who, law enforcement, actually trained with guns with a lot more experience than these teachers will have after a class or two to learn how to, to shoot properly. And that law enforcement official ran away.
He ran away.
He ran away.
For cover, and he was trained.
If I may add to that point,
but that one coward should not dictate how we characterize others.
I have a perfect study for you. I have a perfect
study. Guns in schools? But isn't that your best argument for having guns in schools? Here you had a trained person that was supposed to protect, and he took off.
Well, he was a coward, and I don't believe that the average teacher who loves their students would actually cower in fear and be derelict in their primary duty, which is to keep the students safe.
The average police officer, a study just came out and showed an average officer who is trained hits their intended target 20% of the time. So a teacher that does not have the same level of training as an officer, what is the unintended target within a classroom? It's the student.
But here's
I think you'd be putting our children more at risk.
The problem is a bad guy, crazy guy coming into a classroom wanting to kill the kids. There's no system in place to safeguard those children. Why not, as a last line of defense, have a prepared, trained, and equipped administrator teacher to protect
you? Haven't even put in the first lines of
they may not want to take a life, but why would they sit there and just watch life be taken?
I would not feel comfortable. The fact of the matter is very simple. Is you put a gun in my hand and you try to train me. My job is to educate, and I think that's the primary role of a teacher, a university professor. Students come into our classroom. Our job is to transfer knowledge to that individual.
Those skills aren't mutually exclusive.
Let me say this though: the thing that we're not even talking about is that a lot of teachers themselves have mental health issues.
Teachers do?
Well, then they shouldn't be teaching.
Well, then how do we know that? But how do we know that? Because the other thing that we don't do is that we don't do regular assessments of teachers.
But here's the
problem. We don't do it.
Let's get back to the issue.
That is a part of the issue.
Let me pose this for you. Assume for the moment that these teachers that are going to get these guns, federal dollars through this Department of Education policy, there's got to be some vetting process. In other words, we've got to be able to make sure that the teachers know how to handle the guns, that they don't have mental issues, that they're equipped. That's going to cost more money, and my point is that that's money taken away from education. How do you address that?
And look at the fact that now we're talking about using federal dollars filtered down to the local level. Back last year in 2017, I believe Michigan was allocated like $12 million to address issues of this nature. And the point is that if the federal government is going to make these funds available and we're going to actually step up and do something credible, reasonable, and likely to succeed with safeguarding our children, why not do it?
That is only one opinion, though, because the state has already balanced the budget off the backs of the K-12 school budget. Governor Snyder has taken away nearly $5 billion since being in office initially from K-12 schools.
If you can't guarantee the safety of the children in school,
the conversation should be geared. If I may, the conversation should be geared to how do you prevent the gun from coming into the hands of the perpetrator to begin with?
But isn't
great, perfect, and I agree. But you know what? At the end of the day, more gun control is not going to solve the issue.
What about a deterrent effect, though? And it would, if I know that these gun-free zones, like schools are right now, if we allow guns in some form, wouldn't that perhaps be a deterrent to criminal activity?
It absolutely would be, for the simple fact that
Dr. Sabrina, you addressed that.
I would definitely say no, because people have guns in their homes now. That don't stop the bad guy from trying to get in.
But there's consequences and repercussions when they come in the wrong house.
But that's not a deterrent. It's not a deterrent.
Well, okay then, but there's swift punishment, and you know what? On top of punishment, we will ensure that other people are not empowered to do those dastardly things.
And this is the other thing. If there is a gun in the classroom and the kids know that there's a gun in the classroom, they may try to get the gun. We haven't talked about that.
Well, what kid would try to get the gun from the actual teacher?
The number of kids that take it from their parents or whatever.
Are we saying that we're advocating a system that the children in the actual classroom actually knows that the teacher is actually armed? The average person who's carrying a gun concealed and they actually have some skill at it, you would never know that they were armed.
Dollars. The students don't know.
But those students wouldn't necessarily know. And the whole idea of using guns as a deterrent is bad guys don't know who's armed.
Let me be rather direct. Last word on this. If I found out guns were coming in the classroom, I am not going back into the classroom.
But there are teachers who are willing to do so, and if you're not, thank you for your service. You know what? Let's get another teacher who can make it happen.
I'm just throwing this out here. Is this a moment where we teach the respect for guns? Guns are legal. They're not going anywhere. But there's an opportunity to teach people to respect guns, to learn how to use them properly, not to go crazy with them, and maybe by having a gun in the classroom, it does not become such, and I'm just throwing this out, as such a, a mystery. I don't know. All right, we'll see about that. All right, the topic is not done. We'll figure that out.
Not at all.
All right, hang on. We are going to do something just a little different. We're going to have a couple different topics here, and we're going to throw out a couple current events and let our panelists debate them. That's coming up in just a moment.